Gewoon nu die erbij. Gruwelijk blacks erbij.
Good time. Whatever time it is when you're watching. This is the Noisia AMA.
Woo! In our friendly Noisia home.
Yes. So Thijs isn't here. As you can see,
he's doing shows in America and in studio currently. With,
having all the fun without us.
Yeah.
Hanging with Skrillex, with Amon Tobin, with Ivy Lab.
Yeah. Doing
What's So Not.
Doing shows in LA, in Portland, somewhere else. I think he's playing Red Rocks even.
So we sent him all the questions as well, and he gave his input. So we're going to go through the questions basically from top to bottom, so it's all going to be mixed. So let's start with the first question. What separates that is basically just the Noisia sticker and the fact that we are making it in a studio with incredibly good sound. So that means that your decisions are well informed, but it's there's no fundamental difference.
Ultimately it's all about the decision making and whether you leave something as is or continue tweaking it.
Yeah, and also Thijs said that being critical of what's actually being played, not all the sounds and drums work with all the patterns and note lengths and melodies, or can work together well. I think I said that.
Oh, you said that. I thought it was Thijs. Yeah. Now what I meant is that it's not only about the sound design. It's also how it fits into a track. The role of the sound is. Actually, we'll get back to this subject when we reach a question about Sinkhole, I think, where there's a lot of tiny little elements that will probably sound really not so great without the context of the drums.
Yeah.
For example, so the sounds aren't necessarily always sublime by themselves, but they work together with the other elements of the track.
Kudu, boys, but y'all getting y'all girls something just because what y'all get, girls, what would you want? How much more than the death?
Okay, this was by far the most interesting question.
Yeah. We've been thinking about it a lot.
And just a little more, maybe?
Yeah, a little bit more than the death.
and we've asked the girls, and they don't really care. They just have us get whatever.
Okay. For me, it's a big part of it is humor, because having fun together in the studio is the best part. Achieving something is great too, but having fun and making each other laugh and surprising each other, I think, is probably the coolest thing. If you can surprise the other person you're working with in a positive way, or in a really negative way, sometimes that works too. I think those are the moments that I like most, because you feel like something new has happened and there's new terrain.
Yeah, we have the silly project where we do Dutch hip hop, where we rap ourselves and we do like little sketches and we record everything and do sound effects and it. That's always a lot of fun. But we also do that in other music sometimes, and it doesn't always end up in the actual track, but usually a track will have like a silly element that was there during the process of the track making, like a little a silly vocal before the drop, and we end up replacing it with a slightly less silly vocal or something later.
Or sillier vocal.
Or sillier.
And it's also, I think, a great way to deal with the pressure of making music and the expectations and not wanting to fail, you know. So if you can use humor to kind of break that open a little bit and create this kind of safe space. And also, I think the surprising thing, what I wanted to add to that is it's just as much fun being the guy that surprises the other as being the guy that's surprised, because when you get surprised by a new musical idea, obviously that opens up a lot of new doors in your brain that you would never have by yourself. And that's one of the key things about collaborations, I think.
Vraag 4.
Stereo widening.
What techniques do you use for stereo widening? Well, there's a lot of ways to look at the stereo field and make sounds occupy the space in there. I like to think of it as two different sounds. So think about what's actually coming out of the left speaker and the right speaker. That way, for example, a double-tracked guitar that's panned hard left, hard right is two completely different sound sources left and right. It's not one guitar with a chorus effect on it that makes it wave across the stereo field. I really don't like chorus effects for that because they make this wavering kind of stereo presence that I think is actually for a lot of sounds very distracting. So I like to think of it as like, what do I want in the left and right channel and what do I want the differences to be? And so sometimes it's as easy as just EQing left and right slightly differently, or using a different reverb left and right, or using slightly different plugin settings left and right. And then you can also decide where you pan them, how far you want them to sit in the middle or how far you want them to go out. And I guess you're constantly checking the mid-side compatibility too. And I find that with doing it more focused on left and right, the mono folding is
very important.
Well, it's very important, but it also I find it kind of easier to manage the mid signal, even though that sounds kind of contradictory, I guess. But
okay, it's obviously an easier process if you have live recordings of things. For example, if you have a shaker and you have 4 bars of it, you can just cut it into 2 sections of 2 bars and just use the first 2 bars on your left channel and second 2 bars on your right channel, and at the same time you get nice stereo instead of using a chorus. But you can use a chorus too for stereo imaging. I mean, sometimes you just still go to a chorus, or like in Serum, for example, you can use a filter and pan the filter different, the filter effect
left and right
different on the left and right channel.
That works.
And it's also in the module, the Serum Effects module. So yeah,
that works. And I guess using exciters on the side signal can make things wider.
If there's already
something there. But
yeah.
I think I guess that's the key. The initial spreading of the sound has to have something natural. If you use a chorus, or if you use, for example, a Haas delay, or the one like a kind of a modified Haas delay, which is the Izotope imager. If you fake stereo with that, you get this kind of bodiless stereo thing that just kind of floats, and it doesn't feel right to me. So and that's what I mean about like a real stereo.
Yeah,
like a real feeling of stereo, real difference between left and right.
But sometimes it's also not necessary to have every element be feel like a big sound. So sometimes you just need to place your sounds differently and space them out across the stereo field, and that will create sort of a general stereo feel.
Yeah, exactly. You also really need very mono elements. If you want certain things to sound very wide, you also need to have things that sound very narrow, because then you can hear the space in between. Otherwise, you're only listening to this wide space.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that all the mono sounds have to sit
be dead
right in the
mono.
middle.
No.
So
long story.
Yeah.
How do you guys approach distortion on bass? I find it tough to keep really aggressive elements sounding smooth like your music.
Well, I think that when a distortion is really aggressive, like a hard clipper, or like when you limit something super aggressively, like a clipping limiter, that distortion is really unforgiving. And if you give it lots of level and big spikes from big bass frequencies, it's going to destroy it's gonna destroy it basically, which can be great. But that's also when things can start sounding really raspy and gritty and horrible. And I think you have to be aware of what your distortion is doing. How, for example, if you use a sine wave and you run it through a basic soft clipper, very gentle soft clipper, it's not going to sound horrible. Not even when you layer other sounds on top and push it a little bit, it'll probably sound warm, but it's not going to generate high end necessarily, like new high end, like raspy, horrible shit. And I guess I always think of it in terms of like how aggressive is the clipping, how far up will the harmonics go, and how much will the sound get destroyed. And with bass you have to be very careful because bass has a lot of energy, needs a lot of energy in the mix, and therefore will quickly occupy a lot of space going into a distortion and therefore make the sound distort. So be gentle. Also not be gentle, because obviously experiment with it and see where it takes you. But when it comes to distorting bass with other elements, I think you should be quite careful, especially when it's later stage in your mix. If it's going into your, if a bass is going into your master above 0 and another sound is going there in there too above 0 and it's hitting a hard clipping limiter, that sort of stuff will make your mix sound aggressive and bad.
But also, I mean, you should really EQ after distortion. Like you should still mix. It's just an element. Your newly distorted sound is just another new element in your mix that you need to treat, like depending on what other elements are there and how loud your mix is in general.
Yeah.
So you might want to have the effect of the distortion, but not necessarily all the harmonics in the mix.
Yeah, and also you can like the level going in. I guess I am very careful of the level going into a distortion, the elements going into a distortion, and also like he's saying post EQ, but also pre EQ, and just see where the threshold is. Because if your sound is kind of dynamic going in, you can kind of tell where it's starting to push too much and where it's pushing not enough, and then you just find the happy middle. And also, don't forget that when you put a plugin on something, it already often changes something. So don't be too like abrasive with it because you think nothing is happening. The stuff will happen to your sound, and often when you're distorting something, you tend to go too far because you're using the distortion plugins or you're distorting. But try dialing it down a little bit and then taking it all off and back on again and see what it does. Maybe it's already enough. How do you get your track so loud and upfront? Prioritizing your elements, I guess, is super important. Making sure that you know what your song is about first. So when you're writing the song, figure out what it's really about, what sounds represent that, so what sounds need to be up front. You can't have everything sit middle right in your face, so you have to figure out which ones will sit there.
Yeah, and also it's a lot of it is not necessarily. I mean, a track is either loud or it's not loud, but a lot of the perception comes from context of how you build into that, and like little few millisecond breathing moments.
For a sense of scale, because otherwise it just is one.
And
break.
also for the limiter to be able to
catch up. Yeah, that's sort of stuff, and I guess also being very aware of the things that take most of the energy in a mix. So low-end elements will take up most of the energy in a mix. So what you see now in drum and bass, for example, has been a trend for quite a while to have very short drum sounds, and the reason is that the drum sounds will have a fundamental frequency, which is the loudest frequency, taking up most space in the mix. And the shorter that is, the quicker the mix can transfer into other sounds that have need a lot of space. So the shorter those sounds are, the louder your mix goes. It's not really true, but then it does kind of feel like that. That's definitely a trend. And so being aware of those elements, like the fundamental of your kick drum, fundamental of your snare, and the fundamental of your bass, where you're putting them, and what level they are, they're going to take up a lot of energy, and you're going to have to figure out, do I want to have this at maximum level, or is this not that important? Is this bass line more growly? Maybe it doesn't need a 0 dB sine wave as a sub. Maybe it needs less of it. And I personally mix every song differently, and also mix every song to very different loudness standards. We have some stuff out that's very loud and some stuff that's way quieter, and I mean, it's kind of weird to do that. I'm not sure if it's a popular way of doing things, but I do like that. I think the loudness is part of the song, and so it can be very different per song.
Yeah.
So it completely depends on the music. And then I guess another point for the loudness is that in your master bus, you want to be very aware of peaks. Your limiter doesn't like peaks. So if you make sure that whatever goes into your master, you're controlling the peaks well. So if there's like some hi-hat element or a mid-range element that's very spiky, try and flatten it a little bit before it goes into the master, so it doesn't mess up the bass when it goes into the limiter together with the bass. So for this sort of stuff, sidechaining is obviously really helpful. Yeah. I hope that answers the question a little bit. Will the Huilende Rappers ever release a new album?
Well, the Huilende Rappers will definitely try to release a new album.
Yeah,
we're on and off working on elements that could possibly go on a Huilende Rappers album in the future. So yeah, if it happens, it happens.
Yeah, we want it to happen.
Yeah.
I think my first music creation software was Magic's Music Maker.
My first was, I think, a very early version of Cubase, but
Cubasis or something. What was it called?
I think it was just Cubase,
Oh.
but I didn't get it to work. I got it to work, but didn't really get it to work, and I got it to run, but didn't actually manage to get any music out of it.
Oh no, actually, I think it was Hip Hop EJ.
That was yours.
Yeah,
your first.
and then Magic's Music Maker.
Yeah, I got Magic's Music Maker after that too, and we got a CD with Fruity Loops one
And Acid. Rebirth.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were just
Rubber Ducky.
We were just behind the tracker guys. Like we never worked with trackers.
Now
coming
it
up.
was sort of around the same time, I think,
Yeah.
but we just didn't get our hands on it.
No, and it was complex. It was like for our youthful brains, it was hard to understand the trackers. There's so many numbers and stuff.
So this was in '99-ish, I think.
Earlier, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So around it, 98, 99. Yeah.
Yeah. Music was not your life. What would you be doing? If music was not my life, so if there was no music at all, I would probably do visual stuff, or I might study something. Recently, I'm actually quite interested in psychology, so I don't know. Maybe I would become a shrink.
Bam.
That would be really weird, or like maybe a mentor kind of coaching kind of thing. Maybe.
I had applied for physics at university, and I only just made it into the conservatory and music education here, and I was only told that I could actually go forth and do that, start the first year there at the beginning of that year. So up until that point I was still gonna go physics or music, but I was already making music, obviously, so without music at all I would probably just do something that is
Sandwich shop.
Yeah, sandwich shop. Yeah, sandwich shop. I was gonna say do some entrepreneurial stuff,
Yeah.
and just do something that is exciting all the time. But that's not the sandwich shop. But
No.
the sandwich shop is something I could.
It's definitely your skill set.
Yeah.
You could run a sandwich shop based on your talent for making sandwiches. So that's like
and my talent for running.
That's it's your plan B.
Yeah.
If you have to have one.
Yeah.
Do you pay attention to phase alignment between kick and bass? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's what I have been doing recently is going for quite a short crossover between the kick and the bass, so that you minimize the area where you can have a phase issue, but you can still have them. I guess if you have a song and you have the bass is playing one note all the time and it's always on the kick, then you can just make sure that your kick and your bass are phase aligned properly. You could even use a longer version of your kick almost to bypass the problem. But I don't go so far as to create every sound to align with the kick perfectly. I don't do that. But maybe for a song at some point it would be important to try it, or it would be important for the sound to do it. But it
really depends on
it really depends on the material, because also what your bass is doing. Maybe your bass already has quite a strong transient in it as well, or not, or the kick is sitting way higher than the bass.
Yeah, or it's playing like a complex.
A complex
thing.
riff.
Yeah.
So what I usually do is just look at how they combine throughout the loops, and then see if there's a spike that comes out and my limiter's showing it. Then I'll basically listen to it and think, is this a bad one? Can I hear it? Is it annoying me, or am I okay with it? And in a lot of cases, I'm okay with it. But sometimes you can definitely tell that there's something flying out, and then you have to take care of it somehow. And then that's usually some manual editing or phase shifting and stuff like that. But if you try to do it for everything, then it would get quite exhausting, I think. I know there's you could do audio, like put your kick and the final bass that you've made, and basically crossfade them in audio and move them around until they sit right. You could do that at the very end with bounced stems.
Yeah, but for some tracks that's actually the way you would approach it anyway.
Yeah.
But not for, you couldn't do that with every.
No, with live MIDI and live instruments, it's
no, but also with a riff, it would literally it will mess up the sound more. You will mess up the sound more by cutting it up into sections where the kick hits and then shifting around.
It could mess things up. Yeah, and also you only should really be doing it if you want it to sound like one thing. Sometimes it's actually quite nice to have a sidechain that ducks for longer than the kick is happening, to get the feeling of sidechain, to get the creative effect of sidechaining, because sometimes that can make the sound and the track groove a lot more. So it's not always about making the kick sit as a bass, like have a longer bass to make it sound like one sound, because that's a creative choice.
Yeah.
So some no-goes, I think one thing that can really bum you out, I think especially if you're starting out, is if you would A-B with a well-established, really well-mixed, loud track. If you do that, it can give you a lot of information, but it's also probably going to make you feel like shit. And the track's not the same. And if you're trying to make the same track, then you're stupid, because if you're making the same thing, well, I guess you can experiment with that. But for research, it can work. But if your track is probably something different, and if it's something different, it should be mixed differently. So comparing it too much to other tracks and is only going to lead to like homogeneous music. If you like the snare in one track and your snare sounds a little bit different, don't necessarily try to imitate too much. I guess that's
try to make it work in your track.
Yeah.
And in general, that's probably the best advice to go about anything, really, is to just listen to your elements and see if they're all right, and don't try to fix something that's not right in the basic elements. Like if you just imported a snare, and you're trying to make the track work with that snare, regardless.
Try to mix it to make it work.
That might just not work at all. You might never get there because you just used the wrong snare.
Yeah, I think that's something that you always remind people of, which is like the elements. Have you chosen the elements correctly? Are you beating a dead horse when you're trying to mix an EQ and all this stuff? Does it need that? The best songs come together really quickly, and you don't find yourself doing all that much EQing and mixing because the sounds are speaking for themselves. So if you find yourself doing a lot of that, go back, take the macro perspective for a second, be like, well, what if I just change the hi-hat instead of EQing it for an hour?
Yeah.
What if I just try a completely different hi-hat? So and I guess, this question is about mix and master, but for us, that whole process is intertwined because we mix and master most of our own stuff. Or pretty much, we mix all of our own stuff, and sometimes we have a second ear on mastering, but that is an important process because you can unite it in your sequencer. It's all happening there. You can make those decisions. You can say, well, this mix sounds like ass. Why is that? Well, the snare is actually sitting in a weird space, and I've been trying to fix it. Let's try something completely different.
Yeah. And the hi-hat is actually a more important element than you'd expect.
Yeah.
It could really ruin a track or make it, and it goes as far as like tiny little fade outs or like just note length of hi-hats or variation in note length. All that stuff can make such a big difference. Or sidechaining the hi-hat or not sidechaining the hi-hat or grouping with the other drums. That all that stuff can make such a big difference for the overall sound of your track. And if you swap that out, it will make such a much bigger difference than all the EQing and limiting that you can do on the master.
And I guess also a must is to think about how little you can use to get your point across. So can you mute more elements on the part that you want to have loud? Can you make do with less? Can you limit the spectral signature of the sounds to accommodate for more sounds in their own spaces? Or because I find that recently quite helpful for mixing. Say you've got a snare and it's got a fundamental and the harmonics go up into the mids, and then there's like a noise and a hi-hatty bit all the way up to the very top, to 22K or whatever. When your mix is playing, see what happens if you low pass, like high cut your snare. How far down can you high cut it? Like how much does it actually need? Because once that snare sits in a more limited space, there'll be way more dynamic interplay between the different drum sounds. And that goes for any sound you use. If you make it take up the entire spectrum, which is something we've been doing a lot, it's cool, but you get this one sound. And you can get way more dynamics, even though your mix down is flat like this, the waveform. You can get a dynamic feel by placing the elements in their respective frequency ranges more. So that's an interesting thing, and in that respect you're minimizing.
Yeah.
Well, we want to take this opportunity to send a special shout out to the Discord crew. We really appreciate all the content you guys have been generating, all the memes and all the images and all that stuff. We just got some new ones based off of our spring cleaning video. We were crying with that one. The serum one, it's amazing. So thank you guys so much. It's a really weird and amazing feeling to see stuff like that is about the stuff that you make and about us as people and watching ourselves be meme-ified and stuff like this. It's a really strange feeling, and it's a great compliment. So thank you guys a lot for all that activity.
Is this gonna work? No.
What are your main go-to synths for making basses?
Serum.
Yeah.
Right now it's mostly Serum, but we obviously used FM8 a lot.
Yeah.
And before Serum was there, I don't know, FM8.
FM8. Yeah. Lots of FM8 contact. I mean, Serum is still. I still can't get over Serum. I have Phase Plant and this other synth that I forgot the name of that I still need to check out more, and especially Phase Plant is awesome and I want to get into it more, but I still find myself right now I'm still hanging on to Serum because there's stuff that I can do in there. There's so many possibilities still. But FM8 is great as well. Just now I was doing a bass in FM8 again because for FM stuff it's obviously better than Serum. Even though in Serum with a few tricks you can do exponential FM and linear FM, which you can't do in FM8. FM8 is only exponential FM. Yes.
For more sort of organic bass sounds, modular, Thjis modular setup, and we have some hardware or integrated hardware.
Yeah, the Moog Sub 37. Yeah. I've done some bass stuff with that. The Novation Peak, some bass stuff. But for the designing a bass sound, when you're really making a sound to fit a specific spot or a specific idea, it's at the moment still mostly Serum, which is, I guess, some sort of a disease in the electronic dance music community because it's such a good synth. Everybody's been using it for so long now and still uses it, and that's why people are so excited about Massive X, which is out now. I haven't tried it yet, because maybe that'll bring new possibilities. Okay, question 14. The trigger for me personally with that sort of stuff is just possibilities. When I saw that convolution plugin and realized what it could do, I was like, oh, I want to try and see what happens when I make my own impulses. And that just means for my brain that there's just a whole bunch of new possibilities that can be explored, and that's why I think it's interesting. I don't really research stuff because I want to know how it works. It's just about possibilities, for me anyway. Our secret.
We are really, I'm not sure if it's a positive thing, but we're really good at endless discussions.
Yeah.
And what's the right word?
Deliberation.
Yeah.
Deliberation. Yeah.
Which, I mean, I suppose it's more often a case of not actually showing the world all of our mistakes. Because we make really shitty music. Yeah. Like all the time.
There's a lot of
other stuff.
I guess there's a big filter, and there's a lot of like consensus talking and thinking about it, and it's kind of contradictory and weird because some of the music is just dance music. But we think about it a lot, and especially Thijs is a really brainy guy. He likes to think of all these things from a larger perspective, and I also really like the idea of a song being representing a sort of paradigm of a set of ideas somehow, and I feel like that's implicitly in the music, but it's kind of half intuitive, half brainy. I don't know. It's a weird thing, but that's kind of this continuum that we try to keep. We feel like certain things will break that continuum if we put out certain songs or have certain kinds of artwork or say certain things on social media, or just there's a feeling of a certain continuum, and I guess we're very conscious of that. But it's really hard to explain.
You can also bypass it sometimes when there's something that not the same standards necessarily apply to. When you do something funny or
but that's the thing. That's also part of the paradigm.
Yeah.
So exactly. Breaking out of it is also.
So it's not necessarily one thing.
Exactly. It's very fluid, but how there's no real secret. It's just, I guess one thing that's very basic and practical is there's three of us, and for us to release a song, all three of us have to be excited about it. Yeah. And that creates a filter and also is a guarantee, in my opinion, that whatever comes out is of a high quality. What synths did you use on the Asteroids remix? Serum, and FM8. And Serum. And FM8.
And there's a really cool remix vocal in the side signal.
Yeah.
Remix.
Yeah. What studio chairs are you guys sitting in for hours?
We're sitting in Herman Miller chairs.
Herman Miller Mira. You guys have the Miras.
Yeah, I have two Miras. Miras. I've got two Miras. No, I've got two Miras.
Yeah, I have a Mira and an Aeron, which is the predecessor of the.
And it's slightly more complex, right? It's bigger and more expensive. And you have an automatically adjustable desk.
Yeah, because the question also refers to us sitting them in them for hours. I also have a sit-stand modification of my studio furniture, which is really over the top, but I thought it would be cool. So my whole desk can go up and down into memory settings, so I can alternate between standing and sitting. This obviously makes the acoustics kind of weird if you're standing up and the screen doesn't move along with it. The TV doesn't move, so you're kind of going from this to that. But I try to use all that stuff to keep my body a bit healthier, because I tend to cramp up and sit like this for hours, and so I'm trying to use all the measures I can to make sure that I don't get horribly cramped and pain.
Vraag 18. So on stage we always wear custom earplugs, custom-made earplugs. You go to a shop where...
Schoneberg Hoorcomfort.
In our case it's Schoneberg Hoorcomfort in Groningen. There's places all around the world that do these, and you have your own ears measured and then have custom mold, is that
Custom mold made.
mold made earplugs with music filters in them, and they will these are 25 dB dampening, but they will try and give you a sort of flat frequency response, so you will still hear the music relatively similar to listening to it without earplugs. These are, they keep changing brand names, but you've got like alias and Exinor.
I guess it's kind of the standard. These are for musicians and
yeah. So you get 9, 15, and 25 or something close to that as filter options, and you should just get the 25 dB ones and get used to it. It's very weird at first to DJ with earplugs in if you're not used to it, but it's definitely worth it, and you'll get used to it. And actually, it will feel better, and the music will actually sound better at some point, because the low frequencies enter your body through your body and not your ears, so it will sound more full and less harsh. So yeah.
Your ears are so different than mine.
Yeah.
This is huge. Like mine.
Really big. Yeah. My ears are big, but also on the inside they're big. Yeah.
Trash 2. This is actually not true anymore. This probably would have been true like a long time ago, 10 years ago probably, but no. We don't use trash on everything.
No. We sometimes use trash as we use other plugins occasionally, if necessary. I mean, it's a very specific thing you can do with trash, and as Nick pointed out earlier, it's one of those plugins that definitely does something, even if it's not doing anything. It adds a DC offset to your signal if you use the...
Yeah, I think recently I looked at it and I just put something through the wave shaper, and the wave shaper was neutral, and somehow it was DC offsetting, or was it maybe it was phase distortion? No. I think it was just a weird offset.
Anyway, you got to be very aware of.
Yeah, but it's great for destroying stuff still.
Yes. And also the envelope and LFO, like you can apply to the EQ before distortion. Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a personal alias. But me and Martijn have a thing called Night Watch, where we do production for other artists, like the Dutch rapper Kraantje Papi. We do his stuff.
Yeah, and we're doing some more production work as Night Watch.
We did Fox Stevenson's album.
No, yeah, co-production, co-writing.
Yeah.
And we
definitely
do
not a lot of like.
No,
just for the record, he produced pretty much. He's a very good producer.
Yeah.
I like that whole thing.
And writer.
And writer, yeah. Good producer, writer.
But he
all-around
needed
great
a
dude.
team.
Yeah. Sometimes, so Nightwatch is very, very varied. Sometimes someone just needs beats and will let you do whatever beats you want. Sometimes someone needs more coaching to what music that they've made works or is best.
Yeah.
So it's always not about us as Nightwatch. It's always like a graphic designer designs graphics for others. It's not an autonomous thing. But then you also have...
I have Zonderling, which is 10 years ago I would have said it was techno. Now it's probably just pop music. No, I mean there's some dance, some club stuff there, and radio music. So yeah, Zonderling, you can look it up on Spotify or wherever.
And obviously Huilende Rappers.
Yeah.
Phase shifting, blah blah blah. Phase shifting, blah 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 blah.
Phase shifting and EQs. Yeah, it exists. It's one of those things that happens when you use a plugin. It changes the sound and you have to be aware of it, but it doesn't mean that you can't use it. It's not a massive red flag, but if you use very steep filters, like a very steep high pass, it's going to do a shit ton of phase smearing, so it can really ruin transients and sounds. So be aware of it and use it musically. Use the EQ musically, and because sometimes it can actually fix things too. If you put a high pass on a kick, a steep high pass kind of below the kick somewhere, it will smear the kick out slightly differently. Sometimes it'll sit better in the mix, and sometimes it won't. You just have to be aware of it. And in those cases, don't use linear mode unless they figure out some godly linear mode. But the linear modes with steep filters is just going to cause horrible pre-ring and just, in my experience, not great. But so yes, there's lots of artifacts when you use steeper filters, but learn to work with them.
How do you find inspiration on days you're not feeling as productive but want to be?
Yeah.
Sometimes you can be productive by not being creative. You can just go through sounds or go through older projects that you've been working on and maybe get inspiration from something that sparked an idea earlier, but that you didn't know how to, that you didn't have energy to continue working on, or no time or whatever.
Yeah, or make notes. Just go through stuff, other sketches, and start making notes about them. Doesn't have to be a creative process. Can just be like, this needs fixing, that needs fixing.
Yeah. You can. That's something you can always do. Just fix things and make notes, or do the actual fixing of notes that you've made earlier.
But also be careful not to fix things that aren't a problem, because I have definitely had things where I had a bounce of something, listened to it, wrote down some notes, and then fixed it on an uncreative day and just fucked up the song basically by fixing problems. So
especially if it's mix problems.
And so forcing yourself to be productive, you can do that. Like a lot of times when I make a sound that doesn't work in the song, I'll bounce it out and save it in a folder, so you have all these patches, all these sounds that you can use later. But also you have to reconcile yourself with the fact that it's not always going to be a great day in the studio. As a matter of fact, for me it's kind of like 50-50. And then I don't even mean great moments. Like, great moments are really rare, but just feeling okay in the studio is about 50%, and feeling like shit in the studios is another 50%. But you have to try to find a mechanism for yourself to motivate yourself. So if you really thrive on knowing, like on ticking boxes and being productive in that way, make sure that you find a way to do that by exporting sounds or cataloging things or searching for new sounds on the internet and cataloging those and making notes, that sort of stuff. For me personally, I also kind of go into like failing and making a song that sounds bad or having no ideas is also a headspace that you just have to sit in for a while. That's how I see it anyway. Maybe it's not the same for everybody, but I try to just reconcile myself with that feeling and try to not fight it too much and just go through it and maybe have a crap day, maybe kick a ball around if you're really frustrated or whatever, or scream at the wall. It's all part of it. You're never always going to be creative.
Or do spring cleaning.
Yeah, or do spring cleaning, yeah.
So I'm not sure if you still do it, but I always have a fab filter limiter on
Yeah.
the master when I start working on a track. I think you're using L2.
No,
L1?
No, I'm using fab filter as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but L
Pro
yeah,
L. I mean.
Pro L. Yeah,
but
yeah.
Pro L2, right?
Yeah.
So I'm still using Pro L1. I don't know why. I like the way it sounds, I suppose, or I like the way I know it.
Yeah.
The
That's
way
very important.
The way it affects sound, and depending on what kind of track I want it to be, I used two different modes: the transparent mode, or the what's the default again?
Isn't that transparent?
No,
or is it
transparent
all round?
is all round. Yeah. So all round is much more compact sounding, and transparent is actually, I think it's not. Is it soft clipping, or is it sort of?
Well, that depends on, I guess, how you said it.
It's I don't know, but that if I want it to
That's
sound
the more
open,
aggressive, more open and aggressive.
I set it to transparent.
Yeah.
I'm not as aware of how it actually affects the.
But you hear it.
Yeah, I hear it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Different modes. I'm just not interested enough in figuring out how that actually works.
yeah. Well, I also generally kind of work like that. I have a limiter set to a very basic mode, but I think I have it set a bit more aggressively. I don't always keep that setting, but it shows me pretty clearly. I use it as a visual cue as well, that I notice like, oh, the limiter's working here, so it's doing something. So I'll have a look at my project and see if I wanted to do stuff like that. So I'll have it for that kind of reference, and then maybe if the song doesn't need that clipping at that stage that way, then I'll use a softer limiter, make a nice mix down maybe. and sometimes I'll use other plugins on it as well, like some saturation if something sounds a little bit cold, or a little bit of extra dynamic inflation. Like I think I use, for example, the Sonox inflator or limit. That the Sonox limiter also has an enhance thing. Sometimes you can use that. Maybe a little bit of EQ or a little bit of compression.
It's funny how we used to use that Sonox enhance slider like 10 years ago or something, and then now you're using it again.
Yeah, that's because Martin showed it to me, because he was saying like limiting a little bit first and then using that after and then limiting again. That can kind of work, using a sort of controlled limiting first that is not super aggressive necessarily, and then taking that signal and pumping it a little bit with a few other plugins, and then limiting that again with a harder limiter. That can work, but you have to be very careful.
But mostly, was that another question? Where?
Oh yeah, it's separate channels or.
So most processing goes on separate channels or groups, not
definitely.
on the master.
Definitely. I really like some of that stuff, and I can definitely, if I'm at a party where they're playing that sort of stuff, it always does get me. But I like the stuff I like the most is the oddball things, like Moody Good and Space Laces. They're always sort of curveballing it a little bit, and that's when I get excited.
I mean, yes, I suppose it's you want to be surprised by, or in some way surprised by what you're hearing. Someone, if it's just a generic similar track to everything else, then maybe it sounds good, or maybe
it's still sometimes quite impressive in a way, but it's not. The stuff that we want to play on Noisia Radio is more. We want to pick the stuff that's more experimental, I guess.
And also generally it comes down to snare choice.
Snare choice.
No, there's a lot of like the stuff that we did actually play on Noisia Radio that was 140 or 150 had an unorthodox snare for the genre that it was in, because it will instantly make it sound more deliberate or something, like more, not necessarily experimental, but just more thought out or something. I don't know.
Well, yeah, or maybe less everything balls to the wall, maximal. That's all.
More controlled.
Although that sometimes is great as well.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. It's just we love intense music, but some of that stuff is great if there was only one track of it. But because there's a lot, it doesn't really make sense for us to play it. I don't know. So we're just looking for excitement basically.
Yeah.
Leopard Slug. Oh yeah, we just listened to it on my phone.
Yeah, we can't really find it. There's just a switch in the pattern there.
Yeah.
So it's deliberate.
If you mean a stutter in the audio file or something, then maybe it's there. I couldn't tell on my phone, but the pattern does change. That the pattern like shifts, and that was intentional because we lock it.
Yeah. So maybe that sounds like a glitch.
Yeah. Potatoes.
Tomatoes. No, I mean it's very different, and it depends so much on everything. Like what kind of festival, who else is on the lineup, who's playing before you, what kind of crowd are you expecting? Is it summer? Is it winter? Is it how am I feeling? That probably the most. Because I mean, I suppose a lot of people don't really realize that you actually, like when you book a show, it's generally like 6 months in advance or something. So you really don't know how you're gonna feel that day, and you gotta go. I mean, I've been on stage really sick, or really happy, or while I was having. Like after I lost a family member, something like that, or maybe not that day, but like just life affects it a lot.
More than the place.
And also if I just played a really cool like underground club show and then play a big festival the day after, it can go either way. I can feel really disappointed at the festival that it's not the club show, or I can be very excited that I get to play this slightly different type of tracks that work at a festival that I couldn't play. There's so many different elements, but they're all possibly really nice and good, or really shitty, and everything in between.
Yeah, what do you think of the Kilohearts plugins? Nice.
Yeah.
Really nice. Nice plugins. Especially really like the ring mod, which I finally figured out how to use after we asked for a specific functionality that they put in, and then I never realized that they actually put it in and didn't know how it worked. But now I do, and it's great and awesome, so thank you.
Yeah, they're probably the team that are most open to suggestion.
Yeah, they're really close. They're really responsive. Yeah, it's really awesome. Can Nick actually play drums, or is it just for show? It's not just for show, but I also can't really play it.
You're learning.
I'm taking lessons now for like a couple of months, so I love playing it. It's not really also my ambition to be a really good drummer in a technical sense. I just like the physical nature of playing something. It's just awesome. I really love playing it. And there's drums in. I record stuff, and sometimes it ends up in the music. But don't expect me to play Noisia tracks live or something. It's not my ambition.
There's an amazing drum fill just before the drop of Voodoo remix.
Is that? Oh yeah, that was also a drum kit. Yeah. What's your favorite books related to audio? Well, for me, I liked This Is Your Brain on Music by Daniel Levitin. It's a really cool book. There's a fantastic anecdote about owls and fundamentals and how your brain processes pitch. It's really crazy. You should read it and get your mind blown.
I should read that.
Yeah, and I also found the book called How Music Works by David Byrne. I've been reading that. It's interesting because he's very practical about how music works. So he describes things like church music and African music and the contrast between them, largely based on the practical circumstances of how the music was consumed and made. And this explains a lot about traditions in music that sometimes feel as if somebody just thought it up, that it should happen like that, and that it's like a creative choice, but often it's just determined by the circumstances. And that I thought was it's kind of clear and practical. I like that book.
I wonder if there's a book that explains why the 4/4 time signature is so omnipresent. Because I can't seem to figure out why it's got to be 4 counts. Like, why is it not just 2? Because it's obviously based on steps, but I mean,
right,
1 2 1 2, but it's always 1 2 3 4. Where did that come from? There's probably a very simple answer to that someone
clever
will have. It's either in a book or maybe someone who sees this video can explain it to us. Yeah, I don't really. I've read books about music when I was studying, but I don't really. Nothing really stuck. So I don't really have an answer to this one.
I also got given a really cool book, which is called Harmonograph. It's this tiny little book, which is a bunch of illustrations that were made using a certain piece of machinery that draws oscillations, and it draws it in 2 dimensions, and it creates really beautiful shapes based on the harmonics and stuff. It's interesting, very interesting if you're interested in harmonics.
Are you striving to get a fresh identity more oriented on sound design, Alex, or do you think the experiments are good to release?
Yeah.
It's definitely the latter. It's just an idea. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here on mostly probably Thijs' computer, but you also have a lot of time signature experiments and a different amount of standard bar type variations. Is that a sentence?
Yeah,
probably
totally.
not. Yeah, but yeah, most of it never actually turns into a full track that is good enough to be released, or just
has a reason.
Cool
It has a reason to exist more than the fact that it's an interesting experiment. I think for me, what makes the whole, what made that one worth finishing and releasing is that it. For me, it really was very evocative and gave me a lot of imagery, and kind of a story then came out of it, and that story was worth telling in the song, I think. And for me, a lot of the songs, I can work best on music when it's evocative like that. For me, the same thing with Cleansing and Pleasure Model, like some element will start stimulating some sort of imagination, and then that imagination can tell you where the song needs to go, and it's actually it's just a picture in your head. It's not just what's in your sequencer, and I think more the criterion for a song, whether we release it or not. Does it have that extra quality? Is it worth? And this one is definitely the story of it. It's not just that it's a 17/8 time signature. It's not about that. It's that serves the bigger picture, the bigger feeling that you're supposed to get from the track.
Yeah. It's kind of it does actually remind me of the fact that you have been doing a lot of that, like creating a 5 bar or 5 bar MIDI part, and then writing a pattern, and then time stretching it back to 4 bars, or something. Or the other way around.
Yeah.
To create different types of weird timed bits that you wouldn't actually write otherwise.
Yeah.
Really
But
nice.
then I guess there's also Thijs' influence. I know Thijs was excited about this sketch when it was just a sketch, because it's in his world, I guess. He so it is definitely his influence is in there, and also in the fact that we finished it and we're putting it out. Yeah.
So. We thought that Thijs is probably slightly healthier now.
I think so.
But he's older though, so on average, he's probably gonna be doing just about the same amount of damage on the parkour. I've actually been witness to some of his moves in the past years, and yeah, it wasn't always very successful. But he's just he does stuff that you couldn't actually come up with. When you're in an airport or something, and he just jumps over stuff. Anyway, yeah, it doesn't always work out good for him. As in, he has fallen on his face and stuff like that. But I mean, you got to give him credit for doing it in the first place. I think that's really. It's really cool.
We started doing that stuff.
We didn't plan that role in that video either.
No,
he just started doing that stuff.
Yeah.
That's him.
We used to go to I remember going to this place near the highway where you could jump from the bike path into a ditch that was really quite deep, but there was huge bushes in the ditch, and so you could basically launch yourself into the ditch, and get caught by the bushes, and we would spend a whole night just jumping into the bushes.
I've got a very old video that I haven't found again of me and Thijs in the park here. We've spent 2 days, I think, jumping into stuff and riding a bike off a hill and then just tripping on purpose and flying off the bike. I hurt myself badly.
I guess we kind of grew out of that.
Yeah.
And Thijs didn't.
No, maybe. I haven't seen him do a lot of moves recently, but
yeah.
Anyway. Thijs, love you, sorry.
What do you call studio? Thijs studio, do you have
Yes, we do.
We have 3 rooms.
We have 3 rooms. We all have our own. If you can see this on our Facebook on the Building the Noisia Studios photography series.
Yeah. And more recently on Instagram, we've posted 3.
Yeah. I guess you could think that it's one studio that we keep taking all these different photos of, but no. It's 3.
Yes.
And that's crazy.
So Sinkhole started out with the siren sound and an idea to make a track like Control by Emperor. Just a deep roller. There's a first like little audio clip of that somewhere on the computer, and then we just Frankensteined it into Sinkhole eventually. I think we've just found all the speech, which was a really nice journey into some really interesting YouTube material. And then you just added like an extra section of build, right? So there was a build up and then a drop, and then now there's a second section of build up.
Yeah,
it's not really build, it was just a...
All I remember is that you were doing it, and then I thought you had already called it Sinkhole, and you were doing that. I think maybe the vocal was already there, and I was like, okay, I want to make some sounds that sound like a huge hole is opening up.
Yeah.
And those are the sounds that are before the drop, and then you, I think by that time had already flipped it to be a halftime thing and had all the sounds in the drop there and all that craziness, I think. Or was it no? That's something from your project. Anyway, so when we Frankensteined it together.
Yeah. So I remember that was actually quite a job to get like the important elements that you added to my project back from your computer into my whatever.
Yeah, I think it was audio, wasn't it?
Yeah. But you had a bouncer, and it was all affecting each other. There was some kind of, you were gating something or whatever, and then with the vocal and the kick roll or something. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
And then the drop section was just a lot of fun. Just to keep like pretending that you're high. Just keep editing everything and making sounds and I mean, just using the space. That's also why it's halftime, because you have so much more space in time.
And you get that feeling like you want to hold your breath the whole time.
And then there's little, I mean, it was just a lot of like shifting things around slightly. Yeah, and like I said before, if you just solo all the if you just mute the drums, it will probably sound really silly.
Or really great.
Yeah, or really great.
What kind of things really catch your eye when people submit demos? What tracks and musicians from you most impressive?
So
Yeah.
it all comes down to picking, like, not just picking your elements. I mean, if you have a story worth telling with a track, I mean, that can be just a vibe.
Yeah, it's a vibe thing,
Yeah.
right? Especially and also in a kind of a self-evident way. A track has to have a self-evident vibe, because pretty quickly after you start listening to it, you should know and you will know what the track wants to be. And then if it also becomes that and it's executed well, the thing that it wants to be, then the vibe is strong.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll have like a track with an amazing vibey intro where they really nailed a certain vibe, but then on the drop they go someplace completely different, and you're just like, this disconnects, and now it's not what it wants to be in my ear, so the vibe isn't consistent, it's not self-evident.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't matter how well produced it is. Like,
but that can be the vibe too, that it switches.
Yeah,
It's not
exactly.
not the fact that
yeah.
it switches.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it yeah. So it's not a technical thing. It can be a technical thing that sells the track, that
Yeah.
makes it stand out, but it's not. It's never like. And we like a lot of music that's not actually very well produced.
Yeah.
In a sort of classical, technical way.
But we obviously only sign things that have a correct phase alignment between the kick and the bass. Otherwise,
Yeah.
no go.
No, there's a really good example of someone who is very skilled at just nailing weird vibes is Hybrids, for example. He just brings stuff to the table that you were like, okay, this is really crazy, and I would never.
Yeah, you
ever
feel like
make
you're
this,
inside his brain
but
when you hear that music.
But I like it, so
Yeah.
that's what you want to get.
Yeah.
It's very true. A jump up was frowned upon in our scene.
And we also, back in the day, didn't like that kind of jump up.
No.
We fell in love with it later down the line, mostly because of Hazard.
Yeah.
I remember this Hazard Fabric mix CD that had a ton of, like, at that time, jump up would become this small niche kind of darker sound, and we were really impressed by it.
Yeah. And was also a track on there that recently sparked the whole
that
horn.
Buzzards track,
Yeah.
Tyke.
Yeah, the whole
That
horn
was
thing.
the original horn, sort of doom horn thing.
Yeah. And yeah, we started when we did Diplodocus. That was a sort of a first step in that direction that we took, and then we did a bunch of those tracks, but most notably, definitely, Hazard was a very key player in that in the transformation. And to be honest, I've looked up to Annex a lot for
Annex is done.
how they've approached that genre, and how they consistently came with like refreshing stuff that was very sort of on the that it was always very much on the edge of both worlds.
Yeah.
So it was very jump up, real jump up, but also real sort of darker stuff.
Yeah, because Hazard is obviously real jump up from, so but Annex was in the middle there, and during those years, I guess there was a whole flirtatious period between the techie sound and the jump up sound, and it got to a point where I think now there's some producers or some sounds that used to be called neuro, which is now basically jump up, but.
Like
then again,
value is like very jump up.
Yeah, but that's still neuro jump up because
Yeah.
there's another wave of like actual new jump up.
You're right. Yeah.
That's another totally different, like Mackie G tour, that track.
Yeah.
That's like in a different spectrum now for where that. So
yeah, it's very acceptable in the sort of neuro scene now. More
but
so
the older
it was.
that older style is the newer and even older jump up are not that popular.
You're right. On a side note, never mind.
But so
Now I do have to mention this side note, by the way. I always found it very interesting how if you get a jump up EP from a real jump up producer on a jump up label, there's always like 3 insanely loud, distorted, pushed jump up tracks with almost funny riffs, and then there's one sort of deep roller with a vocal.
Yeah,
it's like the contrast is so extreme.
Huge. Yeah,
but
that's
great.
part of the. I guess
there's nothing in between.
Yeah, nothing in between. But I think I think why it was attractive for neuro guys is because the riffs in neuro were getting a little bit stale, and the normal keys were too boring and had been done already. So making sounds with pitches that were in between the keys and kind of gliding and jarring riffs, something needed to sound like it was wrong, like it wasn't supposed to do it, like it was the normal neuro was too safe or something. So then those crazy pitches and kind of the obnoxiousness of those leads came through. And to be honest, now I think it's at a point where if you have max neuro, max jump up, you get this point of absolute fucking nihilism in the music, which I don't like anymore. It's like, what is this? Like, then it's not fun and kind of, we're not supposed to do this. And
but it actually it did go 2 ways. It was that part of jump up that current value sort of explored further.
Yeah, I guess he's by himself there too, because like the way he does it is so extreme.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, but
he should be called extreme value.
Extreme value, yeah.
Current extreme.
But I mean, in terms of neuro funk or whatever you want to call it, neuro dark jump up, and you also have the sort of more organic thing that also started with Hazard, I think.
Well,
No, not really. It's probably not even started with Hazard, but I mean that's
more from that
how
area,
we noticed it was through Hazard. With like the Bumblebees track, and some other stuff. Also air guitar and that sound. A lot of people started doing that, like T.I. and Upgrade and Serum.
Souped up guys.
Level up.
Yeah, more rolling kind of, and time tripping.
Time tripping. Yes, that's the one that. Yeah,
and even something like Bricks Don't Roll would almost not be considered jump up anymore now because it's so mellow.
Organic. Mellow.
Yeah, and organic. Anyway.
Yeah, cool.
Interesting material.
Love it.
I like convolution because of the way it suggests a certain membrane, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but so imagine you've got a synth, just a saw wave, it's just a clean saw, that it has no membrane in the music. It's not like somebody's playing that saw and they put a mic in front of it and recorded it and that's what you're hearing. It's just a saw coming out of your speakers. So the speaker is the membrane you're hearing. You're hearing all the specific qualities of your speaker basically through that saw. But if you use convolution to change the sound, you imply that membrane beforehand. So in a literal sense, you could use convolution to model a guitar amp, and then suddenly it sounds like somebody put it through a guitar amp, put a mic in front of it, and then you're hearing the saw. And that sense of physicality, even though it's also a speaker, is a great way to place things in your mix, and also give them a sense of realness, a real physical thing. And I think that distortion does the same thing. Distortion also limits and changes a sound, and basically creates this physical sensation of the physical limits of a certain membrane. And through the limits of that membrane, you're hearing the membrane again. So that's why I love distortion as well. That's why I love physical distortion much more than wavetables of harmonics that are being swept around that don't sound physical, that just sound like a simulation. And that's why I love using convolution, for that effect, to make things sound physical. And sometimes it can be a very short impulse and the sound can doesn't have any room to it. And sometimes if the impulses are longer, it will become a kind of a reverb, and it will suggest a space around the membrane as well. But it's also the initial membrane.
Yeah, it's a good story.
Did you guys go into drum and bass production with no knowledge of music production?
I started with hip hop
Trance.
and trance. Yeah, later, slightly later. But
Yeah. So when we started making music, we didn't start with drum and bass. So
No.
by the time we found drum and bass, we'd already been making music for maybe a year or two.
Yeah.
So, but that is from, programs like Hip Hop EJ.
Yeah.
So the knowledge of music making was obviously almost none. It's just playing around. And I think that's also great. I think that's how I would have wanted to do it every time. I wouldn't want to go back to my 14, 15-year-old self and be like, you should go into audio school now and then you'll become a really sick producer.
Yeah.
No. Just exactly like that. Just
Yeah.
play
It's
around.
isn't it kind of weird that some of the first music that we, not actually the first music, but some of the first music that we were very impressed by was Cause for Concern.
Yeah.
It's like, what are the odds that
Yeah.
because it was very hard to get your hands on.
Yeah, it was
here.
very obscure. It
It's
was obscure in an obscure it was an obscure genre, and then a subgenre of that genre, which at that time was also very obscure,
And-
then a relatively new producer, which were even more obscure, and then we were like, that's the one.
Yeah, and we were in Groningen,
Yeah,
and there was
yeah.
no Spotify or YouTube
Yeah,
or
nothing.
anything that you could actually listen. You couldn't listen to it. We would go to the record store.
Well, maybe you could see it as a perfect storm in a way, that things were building up for us to really click with a part of drum and bass, and we were listening to it so much, and then that one track was the right moment, right time,
No.
right
No, it's just
producer.
fun. It just occurred to me that
Yeah.
it's pretty, special. Yeah. So we have.
Another question. Oh yeah, your favorite contemporary artist?
Oh ja, ik heb geen.
Kut. Ik dacht, deze ga jij wel even inkoppen.
So.
So that brings us to the end of this week. Of
Oké,
this
even
AMA.
opnieuw, even opnieuw.
Nee, dat is toch mooi? Dat deed ik expres, man.
Oké. Oh, sorry.
Want het is net
Oké,
Noisia
oké.
Radio.
Oké.
So that brings us to the end of this week's of this AMA.
Yay.
Yay!
Yeah, thanks for all the questions. We hope you enjoyed some of the answers.
Yeah.
If not all.
it was nice to get questions from you guys. I enjoyed answering them. I enjoyed the scenery as well. Thank you guys for your patronage. We very much appreciate it. And catch you guys next time. Fade out, fading out, fading out, fade out, slowly.
Hold on.
Fading out. Going away. Slowly. Going away. Disappearing. I am not here. Yeah?